Hello, fifth graders. I hope you've all been having a fabulous winter break and that, this week of distance learning goes really well. We're starting Wonder, the book that you have all been waiting to read. And every time we finish one book, you guys have wanted Wonder so bad. We're finally going to be reading it. Wonder is definitely one of my favorite books that I have ever read. And you guys know that I love reading, and I've read a lot of books. I remember reading this with my very first fifth grade class, and the characters in this novel are around your guys' age. And I just remember reading it with that first class and seeing parallels between events happening in the characters' lives and events that were happening in my fifth graders' lives at the time. And that has just happened every single year, being able to see those connections between the characters we're reading about and then you guys, my students that I am teaching. So I hope you end up loving this book as much as I do. I know many of you have seen the movie, and it's a fabulous movie, and I'm here to tell you that the book is even better. We've talked about how the books are usually better than the movies. It's the same in this case, even though the movie is already pretty dang amazing. So whenever we read fifth grade, it's going to be kind of like Winn-Dixie, that we will have some questions to answer. Remember, I gave you those big booklets before break that are bound with like a plastic binder clip, kind of like a little book. So I will always tell you which questions on which page in that booklet you should be answering and which vocabulary words you should be coming up with a definition for. So remember, you can always use a dictionary at home, or you can go to www.dictionary.com as an online tool to help you come up with definitions for your vocabulary words. As always, make sure you're emailing me if you have any questions. All right, so a little bit of background. Usually we would do this at school, but since we're virtual learning, it's a little different. The book is about a boy named August Pullman. Augie is what he likes to be called. And he has, we assume he has a condition called Treacher-Collins syndrome. We're never officially told the name of his condition in the book. However, based on the characteristics of Augie and what we are told about him, many assume he has Treacher-Collins syndrome. And so what Treacher-Collins syndrome does, and we're going to read about this probably in the first or second day of reading, is it really affects how a person looks, how they physically develop. It can affect the way that their ears are formed to the point where it's hard for them to hear, and so sometimes they need special hearing aids. Their ears are sometimes placed lower on their neck than most people's. Their eyes may be more hooded. They may have like a cleft lip. If you've ever seen a baby who's born and maybe their top lip isn't fully formed and they have to have a little surgery for it to be fused together again, babies with Treacher-Collins syndrome can sometimes have those. So I would say it affects a lot of cosmetic things about a person. And when I say cosmetic, I mean how someone looks. But for example, like if ears aren't formed the way most people's are, then that cosmetic part, how it looks, that can affect the usefulness of it. So for ears, if they aren't formed the way that most ears are, it can affect how someone hears. So Augie has Treacher-Collins syndrome, and we read about what life is like for him having this syndrome and going through life with his family and his friends. And you guys, the thing that I love most about this book is that we get to go inside the mind of multiple characters. So we will be in Augie's head for quite a bit of the book, but then we also get to be in the head of some of the other characters. And I absolutely love that about this book, being able to see things from different characters' point of view. All right, I'm done talking. Let's start reading. I'd like you to open up your book to page 1 of Wonder. And you'll notice that on page 1, before we actually start reading, it's a part. So each part, it will tell us whose perspective it is from. So on the left page, It says, doctors have come from distant cities just to see me stand over my bed, disbelieving what they're seeing. They say I must be one of the wonders of God's own creation, and as far as they can see, they can offer no explanation. So that's from Natalie Merchant, Wonder. So part 1, August. So this first part is told from Augie's perspective. Fate smiled and destiny laughed as she came to my cradle. So again, Natalie Merchant, Wonder. Page 3, Ordinary. I know I'm not an ordinary 10-year-old kid. I mean, sure, I do ordinary things. I eat ice cream, I ride my bike, I play ball, I have an Xbox. Stuff like that makes me ordinary, I guess. And I feel ordinary inside. But I know ordinary kids don't make other ordinary kids run away screaming in playgrounds. I know ordinary kids don't get stared at wherever they go. If I found a magic lamp and I could have one wish, I would wish that I had a normal face that no one ever noticed at all. I would wish that I could walk down the street without people seeing me and then doing that look away thing. Here's what I think. The only reason I'm not ordinary is that no one else sees me that way. But I'm kind of used to how I look by now. I know how to pretend I don't see the faces people make. We've all gotten pretty good at that sort of thing. Me, Mom, and Dad, Via. Actually, I take that back. Via is not so good at it. She can really get annoyed when people do something rude. Like, for instance, one time in the playground, some older kids made some noises. I don't even know what the noises were exactly because I didn't hear them myself, but Via heard and she just started yelling at the kids. That's the way she is. I'm not that way. Via doesn't see me as ordinary. She says she does, but if I were ordinary, she wouldn't feel like she needs to protect me as much. And Mom and Dad don't see me as ordinary either. They see me as extraordinary. I think the only person in the world who realizes how ordinary I am is me. My name is August, by the way. I won't describe what I look like. Whatever you're thinking, it's probably worse. Why I didn't go to school. Next week, I start 5th grade. Since I've never been to a real school before, I'm pretty much totally and completely petrified. People think I haven't gone to school because of the way I look, but it's not that. It's because of all the surgeries I've had. 27 since I was born. The bigger ones happened before I was even 4 years old, so I don't remember those. But I've had 2 or 3 surgeries every year since then. Some big, some small, and because I'm little for my age, and I have some other medical mysteries that doctors never really figured out, I used to get sick a lot. That's why my parents decided it was better if I didn't go to school. I'm much stronger now, though. The last surgery I had was 8 months ago, and I probably won't have to have any more for another couple of years. Mom homeschools me. She used to be a children's book illustrator. She draws really great fairies and mermaids. Her boy stuff isn't so hot, though. She once tried to draw me a Darth Vader, but it ended up looking like some weird mushroom-shaped robot. I haven't seen her draw anything in a long time. I think she's too busy taking care of me and Via. I can't say I always wanted to go to school because that wouldn't be exactly true. What I wanted was to go to school, but only if I could be like every other kid going to school, have lots of friends and hang out after school and stuff like that. I have a few really good friends now. Christopher is my best friend, followed by Zachary and Alex. We've known each other since we were babies, and since they've always known me the way I am, they're used to me. When we were little, we used to have play dates all the time, but then Christopher moved to Bridgeport in Connecticut. That's more than an hour away from where I live in North River Heights, which is at the top tip of Manhattan. And Zachary and Alex started going to school. It's funny. Even though Christopher's the one who moved far away, I still see him more than I see Zachary and Alex. They have all these new friends now. If we bump into each other on the street, they're still nice to me, though. They always say hello. I have other friends, too, but not as good as Christopher and Zach and Alex were. For instance, Zach and Alex always invited me to their birthday parties when we were little, but Joel and Eamon and Gabe never did. Or Eamon. Emma invited me once, but I haven't seen her in a long time. And of course, I always go to Christopher's birthday. Maybe I'm making too big a deal about birthday parties. How I came to life. I like when Mom tells this story because it makes me laugh so much. It's not funny in the way a joke is funny, but when Mom tells it, Via and I just start cracking up. So when I was in my mom's stomach, no one had any idea I would come out looking the way I look. Mom had had Via 4 years before, and that had been such a, quote, walk in the park, Mom's expression, that there was no reason to run any special tests. About 2 months before I was born, the doctors realized there was something wrong with my face, but they didn't think it was going to be that bad. They told Mom and Dad I had a cleft palate. Remember, guys, that's what we talked about, where like the top lip doesn't fully form together, and some other stuff going on. They called it small anomalies. There were 2 nurses in the delivery room the night I was born. One was very nice and sweet. The other one, Mom said, did not seem at all nice or sweet. She had very big arms, and, here comes the funny part, she kept farting. Like, she'd bring Mom some ice chips and then fart. She'd check Mom's blood pressure and fart. Mom says it was unbelievable because the nurse never even said, "Excuse me." Meanwhile, Mom's regular doctor wasn't on duty that night, so Mom got stuck with this cranky kid doctor she and Dad named Doogie after some old TV show or something. They didn't actually call him that to his face, though. But Mom says that even though everyone in the room was kind of grumpy, Dad kept making her laugh all night long. When I came out of Mom's stomach, she said the whole room got very quiet. Mom didn't even get a chance to look at me because the nice nurse immediately rushed me out of the room. Dad was in such a hurry to follow her that he dropped the video camera, which broke into a million pieces. And then Mom got very upset and tried to get out of bed to see where they were going. But the farting nurse put her very big arms on Mom to keep her down in the bed. They were practically fighting because Mom was hysterical and the farting nurse was yelling at her to stay calm. And then they both started screaming for the doctor. But guess what? He had fainted right on the floor. So when the farting nurse saw that he had fainted, she started pushing him with her foot to get him to wake up, yelling at him the whole time, "What kind of doctor are you? What kind of doctor are you? Get up, get up." And then, all of a sudden, she let out the biggest, loudest, smelliest fart in the history of farts. Mom thinks it was actually the fart that finally woke the doctor up. Anyway, when Mom tells this story, she acts out all the parts, including the farting noises, and it is so funny. Mom says the farting nurse turned out to be a very nice woman. She stayed with Mom the whole time, didn't leave her side even after Dad came back and the doctors told them how sick I was. Mom remembers exactly what the nurse whispered in her ear when the doctor told her I probably wouldn't live through the night. "Everyone born of God overcometh the world." And the next day, after I had lived through the night, it was that nurse who held Mom's hand when they brought her to meet me for the first time. So 5th grade, before we keep reading, can we tell who a person is based on our first impression of them? This is something we've talked about as a class before, and we're going to examine this question a lot in this book. Can we determine who a person is based off of our very first impression of them? No. A lot of you like to use the phrase, "you can't judge a book by its cover." And what that means is if you pick up a book, especially like Wonder, you pick it up, and let's say you take the book jacket off of it. I know some of you can't because it's taped onto your books. But if you're just looking at the cover, can you tell what amazing story is inside just by looking at the cover? Not entirely. You can get bits and pieces, but you don't know for sure. So with this nurse who Isabel, that's Augie's mom, thought was kind of mean, she stuck by Isabel through all the tough parts after the actual delivery of Augie. And she ended up being an awesome woman. So in this case, you can't judge a book by its cover. Mom says by then they had told her all about me. She had been preparing herself for the seeing of me. But she says that when she looked down into my tiny, mushed-up face for the first time, all she could see was how pretty my eyes were. Mom is beautiful, by the way, and Dad is handsome. Via is pretty, in case you were wondering. Why do you think Augie felt the need to say that at the end there, about their looks? Do you think Augie's self-conscious about how he looks, or is worried about how he looks to others? Maybe. Probably. I mean, he's talked a lot about how people react to him, and he felt the need to point out to us, as the reader, that the rest of his family is beautiful, handsome, and pretty. But has he used any positive words to describe how he looks yet? Not really. Christopher's house. I was really bummed when Christopher moved away 3 years ago. We were both around 7 then. We used to spend hours playing with our Star Wars action figures and dueling with our lightsabers. I miss that. Last spring, we drove over to Christopher's house in Bridgeport. Me and Christopher were looking for snacks in the kitchen, and I heard Mom talking to Lisa, Christopher's mom, about my going to school in the fall. I had never, ever heard her mention school before. What are you talking about? I said. Mom looked surprised, like she hadn't meant for me to hear that. You should tell him what you've been thinking, Isabel, Dad said. He was on the other side of the living room talking to Christopher's dad. We should talk about this later, said Mom. No, I want to know what you were talking about, I answered. Don't you think you're ready for school, Augie? Mom said. No, I said. I don't either, said Dad. Then that's it, case closed, I said, shrugging, and I sat in her lap like I was a baby. I just think you need to learn more than I can teach you, Mom said. I mean, come on, Augie, you know how bad I am at fractions. What school? I said. I already felt like crying. Beecher Prep, right by us. Wow, that's a great school, Augie, said Lisa, patting my knee. Why not Via's school? I said. That's too big, Mom answered. I don't think that would be a good fit for you. I don't want to, I said. I admit, I made my voice sound a little babyish. You don't have to do anything you don't want to do, Dad said, coming over and lifting me out of Mom's lap. He carried me over to sit on his lap on the other side of the sofa. We won't make you do anything you don't want to do. But it would be good for him, Nate, Mom said. Not if he doesn't want to, answered Dad, looking at me. Not if he's not ready. I saw Mom look at Lisa, who reached over and squeezed her hand. You guys will figure it out, she said to Mom. You always have. Let's just talk about it later, said Mom. I could tell she and Dad were going to get in a fight about it. I wanted Dad to win the fight, though part of me knew Mom was right. And the truth is, she really was terrible at fractions. Driving. It was a long drive home. I fell asleep in the back seat like I always do, my head on Via's lap like she was my pillow, a towel wrapped around the seatbelt so I wouldn't drool all over her. Via fell asleep too, and Mom and Dad talked quietly about grown-up things I didn't care about. I don't know how long I was sleeping, but when I woke up, there was a full moon outside the car window. It was a purple night, and we were driving on a highway full of cars. And then I heard Mom and Dad talking about me. We can't keep protecting him, Mom whispered to Dad, who was driving. We can't just pretend he's going to wake up tomorrow and this isn't going to be his reality because it is, Nate, and we have to help him learn to deal with it. We can't just keep avoiding situations that... So sending him off to middle school like a lamb to the slaughter? Dad answered angrily, but he didn't even finish his sentence because he saw me in the mirror looking up. What's a lamb to the slaughter? I asked sleepily. Go back to sleep, Augie, Dad said softly. Everyone will stare at me at school, I said, suddenly crying. Honey, Mom said. She turned around in the front seat and put her hand on my hand. You know if you don't want to do this, you don't have to. But we spoke to the principal there and told him about you, and he really wants to meet you. What did you tell him about me? How funny you are and how kind and smart. When I told him you read Dragon Rider when you were 6, he was like, wow, I have to meet this kid. Did you tell him anything else? I said. Mom smiled at me. Her smile kind of hugged me. I told him about all your surgeries and how brave you are, she said. So he knows what I look like, I asked. Well, we brought pictures from last summer in Montauk, Dad said. We showed him pictures of the whole family and that great shot of you holding that flounder on the boat. You were there too? I have to admit, I felt a little disappointed that he was a part of this. We both talked to him, yes, Dad said. He's a really nice man. You would like him, Mom added. Suddenly it felt like they were on the same side. Wait, so when did you meet him? I said. He took us on a tour of the school last year, said Mom. Last year? I said. So you've been thinking about this for a whole year and you didn't tell me? We didn't even know if you'd get in, Augie, she answered Mom. It's a very hard school to get into. There's a whole admissions process. I didn't see the point in telling you and having you get all worked up about it unnecessarily. But you're right, Augie. We should have told you when we found out last month that you got in, said Dad. In hindsight, sighed Mom, Yes, I guess. Did that lady who came to the house that time have something to do with this? I said. The one that gave me that test? Yes, actually, said Mom, looking guilty. Yes. You told me it was an IQ test, I said. I know. Well, that was a white lie, she answered. It was a test you needed to take to get into the school. You did very well on it, by the way. So you lied, I said. A white lie, but yes. Sorry, she said, trying to smile, but when I didn't smile back, she turned around in her seat and faced forward. What's a lamb to the slaughter? I said. Mom sighed and gave Daddy a look. I shouldn't have said that, Dad said, looking at me in the rearview mirror. It's not true. Here's the thing. Mommy and I just love you so much. We want to protect you any way we can. It's just sometimes we want to do it in different ways. I don't want to go to school, I answered, folding my arms. It would be good for you, Augie, said Mom. Maybe I'll go next year, I answered, looking out the window. This year would be better, Augie, said Mom. You know why? Because you'll be going into 5th grade, and that's the first year of middle school. For everyone. You won't be the only new kid. I'll be the only kid who looks like me, I said. I'm not going to say it won't be a big challenge for you, because you know better than that, she answered. But it'll be good for you, Augie. You'll make lots of friends, and you'll learn new things you'd never learn with me. She turned in her seat again and looked at me. When we took the tour, you know what they had in their science lab? A little baby chick that was just hatching out of its egg. It was so cute. Augie, it actually kind of reminded me of you when you were a little baby, with those big brown eyes of yours. I usually love when they talk about when I was a baby. Sometimes I want to curl up into a little tiny ball and let them hug me and kiss me all over. I miss being a baby, not knowing stuff. But I wasn't in the mood for that now. I don't want to go, I said. How about this? Can you at least meet Mr. Tushman before making up your mind, Mom asked. Mr. Tushman, I said. He's the principal, answered Mom. Mr. Tushman, I repeated. I know, right? Dad answered, smiling and looking at me in the rearview mirror. Can you believe that name, Augie? I mean, who on earth would ever agree to have a name like Mr. Tushman? I smiled, even though I didn't want to let them see me smile. Dad was the one person in the world who could make me laugh no matter how much I didn't want to laugh. Dad always made everyone laugh. 5th graders, do you have someone in your in a family member or a friend who always makes you laugh even when you don't want to? Like you want to stay mad, you want to stay angry, but they do one thing and it makes you want to laugh and that almost makes you even more angry. I know I have people who do that to me all the time, and we're blessed to have them in our lives. Augie, you should go to that school just so you can hear his name said over the loudspeaker, Dad said excitedly. Can you imagine how funny that would be? Hello, hello. Paging Mr. Tushman. He was using a fake high old lady voice. Hi, Mr. Tushman. I see you're running a little behind today. Did your car get rear-ended again? What a bum rap. I started laughing, not even because I thought he was being that funny, but because I wasn't in the mood to stay mad anymore. It could be worse, though, Dad continued in his normal voice. Mommy and I had a professor in college called Miss Butt. Mom was laughing now, too. Is that for real? I said. Roberta Butt, Mom answered, raising her hand as if to swear. Bobby Butt. She had huge cheeks, said Dad. Nate, said Mom. What? She had big cheeks is all I'm saying. Mom laughed and shook her head at the same time. Hey, I know, said Dad excitedly. Let's fix them up on a blind date. Can you imagine? Miss Butt meet Mr. Tushman. Mr. Tushman here's Miss Butt. They could get married and have a bunch of little tushies. Poor Mr. Tushman, answered Mom, shaking her head. Augie hasn't even met the man yet, Nate. Who's Mr. Tushman? Via said groggily. She had just woken up. He's the principal of my new school, I answered. 5th grade. What did Augie just say? He's the principal of my new school. Do you think Augie's starting to warm up to the idea of going to school? Do you think that's a good idea? Well, let's keep reading and see. Paging Mr. Tushman. I would have been more nervous about meeting Mr. Tushman if I had known I was also going to be meeting some kids from the new school. But I didn't know, so if anything, I was kind of giggly. I couldn't stop thinking about all the jokes Daddy had made about Mr. Tushman's name. So when me and Mom arrived at Beecher Prep a few weeks before the start of school, and I saw Mr. Tushman standing there waiting for us at the entrance, I started giggling right away. He didn't look at all like what I had pictured, though. I guess I thought he would have a huge butt, but he didn't. In fact, he was a pretty normal guy. Tall and thin, old but not really old. He seemed nice. He shook my mom's hand first. "Hi, Mr. Tushman. It's so nice to see you again," said Mom. "This is my son, August." Mr. Tushman looked right at me and smiled and nodded. He put his hand out for me to shake. "Hi, August," he said totally normally. "It's a pleasure to meet you." "Hi," I mumbled, dropping my hand into his hand while I looked down at his feet. He was wearing red Adidas. "So," he said, kneeling down in front of me so I couldn't look at his sneakers but had to look at his face. "Your mom and dad have told me a lot about you." "Like what have they told you?" I asked. "Sorry?" "Honey, you have to speak up," said Mom. "Like what?" I asked, trying not to mumble. I admit, I have a bad habit of mumbling. "Well, that you like to read," said Mr. Tushman, "and that you're a great artist." He had blue eyes with white eyelashes. "And you're into science, right?" "Uh-huh," I said, nodding. "We have a couple of great science selectives at Beecher," he said. "Maybe you'll take one of them." "Uh-huh," I said, though I had no idea what an elective was. "So are you ready to take a tour?" "You mean we're doing that now?" I said. "Did you think we were going to the movies?" he answered, smiling as he stood up. "You didn't tell me we were taking a tour," I said to Mom in my accusing voice. "Augie," she started to say. "It'll be fine, August," said Mr. Tushman, holding his hand out to me. "I promise." I think he wanted me to take his hand, but I took Mom's instead. He smiled and started walking toward the entrance. Mommy gave my hand a little squeeze, though I don't know if it was an I love you squeeze or an I'm sorry squeeze. Probably a little of both. The only school I'd ever been inside before was Via's, when I went with Mom and Dad to watch Via sing in spring concerts and stuff like that. This school was very different. It was smaller. It smelled like a hospital. Nice Mrs. Garcia. We followed Mr. Tushman down a few hallways. There weren't a lot of people around, and the few people who were there didn't seem to notice me at all, though that may have been because they didn't see me. I sort of hid behind Mom as I walked. I know that sounds kind of babyish of me, but I wasn't feeling very brave right then. We ended up in a small room with the words "Office of the Middle School Director" on the door. Inside there was a desk with a nice-seeming lady sitting behind it. "This is Mrs. Garcia," said Mr. Tushman, and the lady smiled at Mom and took off her glasses and got up out of her chair. My mother shook her hand and said, "Isabel Pullman, nice to meet you." "And this is August," Mr. Tushman said. Mom kind of stepped to the side a bit so I would move forward. Then that thing happened that I've seen happen a million times before. When I looked up at her, Mrs. Garcia's eyes dropped for a second. It was so fast no one else would have noticed, since the rest of her face stayed exactly the same. She was smiling a really shiny smile. "Such a pleasure to meet you, August," she said, holding out her hand for me to shake. "Hi," I said quietly, giving her my hand, but I didn't want to look at her face, so I kept staring at her glasses, which hung from a chain around her neck. "Wow, what a firm grip," said Mrs. Garcia. Her hand was really warm. "The kid's got a killer handshake," Mr. Tushman agreed, and everyone laughed above my head. "You can call me Mrs. G," Mrs. Garcia said. I think she was talking to me, but I was looking at all the stuff on her desk now. "That's what everyone calls me, Mrs. G. I forgot my combination. Mrs. G, I need a late pass. Mrs. G, I want to change my elective." "Mrs. G is actually the one who runs the place," said Mr. Tushman, which again made all the grown-ups laugh. "I'm here every morning by 7:30, Mrs. Garcia continued, still looking at me while I stared at her brown sandals with small purple flowers on the buckles. "So if you ever need anything, August, I'm the one to ask, and you can ask me anything." "Okay," I mumbled. "Oh, look at that cute baby," Mom said, pointing to one of the photographs on Mrs. Garcia's bulletin board. "Is he yours?" "No, my goodness," said Mrs. Garcia, smiling a big smile now that was totally different from her shiny smile. "You've just made my day. He's my grandson." "What a cutie," said Mom, shaking her head. "How old?" "In that picture, he was 5 months, I think, but he's big now, almost 8 years old." "Wow," said Mom, nodding and smiling. "Well, he is absolutely beautiful." "Thank you," said Mrs. Garcia, nodding like she was about to say something else about her grandson. But then, all of a sudden, her smile got a little smaller. "We are all going to take very good care of August," she said to Mom, and I saw her give Mom's hand a little squeeze. I looked at Mom's face, and that's when I realized she was just as nervous as I was. I guess I liked Mrs. Garcia, when she wasn't wearing her shiny smile. Have you guys ever had someone give you a smile and seem to put almost too much effort into the smile? Do you think it means that the person doesn't actually want to smile at you? Probably not, but it's almost as if they want to make sure you see you're getting as much warmth out of the smile as they want you to. But yeah, it can seem a little forced sometimes, can't it? All right, Jack, Will, Julian, and Charlotte. This is going to be the last chapter we read today, 5th grade. We followed Mr. Tushman into a small room across from Mrs. Garcia's desk. He was talking as he closed the door to his office and sat down behind his desk, though I wasn't really paying much attention to what he was saying. I was looking around at all the things on his desk. Cool stuff, like a globe that floated in the air and a Rubik's-type cube made with little mirrors. I liked his office a lot. I liked that there were all these neat little drawings and paintings by students on the walls, framed like they were important. Mom sat down in a chair in front of Mr. Tushman's desk, and even though there was another chair right next to hers, I decided to stand beside her. "Why do you have your own room and Mrs. G doesn't?" I said. "You mean why do I have an office?" asked Mr. Tushman. "You said she runs the place," I said. "Oh, well, I was kind of kidding. Mrs. G is my assistant." "Mr. Tushman is the director of the middle school," Mom explained. "Do they call you Mr. T?" I asked, which made him smile. "Do you know who Mr. T is?" he answered. "I pity the fool," he said in a funny, tough voice, like he was imitating someone. I had no idea what he was talking about. "Anyway, no," said Mr. Tushman, shaking his head. "No one calls me Mr. T, though I have a feeling I'm called a lot of other things I don't know about. Let's face it, a name like mine is not so easy to live with, you know what I mean?" Here I have to admit I totally laughed because I knew exactly what he meant. "My mom and dad had a teacher called Miss Butt," I said. "Augie," said Mom, but Mr. Tushman laughed. "Now that's bad," said Mr. Tushman, shaking his head. "I guess I shouldn't complain. Hey, so listen, August, here's what I thought we would do today." "Is that a pumpkin?" I said, pointing to a framed painting behind Mr. Tushman's desk. "Augie, sweetie, don't interrupt," said Mom. "You like it?" said Mr. Tushman, turning around and looking at the painting. "I do too. And I thought it was a pumpkin too until the student who gave it to me explained that it's actually not a pumpkin. It is, are you ready for this? A portrait of me. Now, August, I ask you, do I really look that much like a pumpkin?" "No," I answered, though I was thinking yes. Something about the way his cheeks puffed out when he smiled made him look like a jack-o'-lantern. Just as I thought that, it occurred to me how funny that was. Cheeks, Mr. Tushman, and I started laughing a little. I shook my head and covered my mouth with my hand. Mr. Tushman smiled like he could read my mind. I was about to say something else, but then all of a sudden, I heard other voices outside. Kids' voices. I'm not exaggerating when I say this, but my heart literally started beating like I'd just run the longest race in the world. The laughter I had inside just poured out of me. The thing is, when I was little, I never minded meeting new kids because all the kids I met were really little too. What's cool about really little kids is that they don't say stuff to try and hurt your feelings, even though sometimes they do say stuff that hurts your feelings. But they don't actually know what they're saying. Big kids, though, they know what they're saying, and that is definitely not fun for me. One of the reasons I grew my hair long last year was that I like how my bangs cover my eyes. It helps me block out the things I don't want to see. Mrs. Garcia knocked on the door and poked her head inside. "They're here, Mr. Tushman," she said. "Who's here?" I said. "Thanks," said Mr. Tushman to Mrs. Garcia. "August, I thought it would be a good idea for you to meet some students who'll be in your homeroom this year. I figure they could take you around the school a bit, show you the lay of the land, so to speak." "I don't want to meet anyone," I said to Mom. Mr. Tushman was suddenly right in front of me, his hands on my shoulders. He leaned down and said very softly in my ear, "It'll be okay, August. These are nice kids, I promise." "You're going to be okay, Augie," Mom whispered with all her might. Before she could say anything else, Mr. Tushman opened the door to his office. "Come on in, kids," he said, and in walked two boys and a girl. None of them looked over at me or Mom. They stood by the door looking straight at Mr. Tushman, like their lives depended on it. "Thanks so much for coming, guys, especially since school doesn't start until next month," said Mr. Tushman. "Have you had a good summer?" All of them nodded, but no one said anything. Great, said Mr. Tushman. "So, guys, I wanted you to meet August, who's going to be a new student here this year. August, these guys have been students at Beecher Prep since kindergarten, though of course they were in the lower school building, but they know all the ins and outs of the middle school program. And since you're all in the same homeroom, I thought it would be nice if you got to know each other a little before school started. Okay? So kids, this is August. August, this is Jack Will. Jack Will looked at me and put out his hand. When I shook it, he kind of half smiled and said, "Hey," and looked down really fast. "This is Julian," said Mr. Tushman. "Hey," said Julian, and he did the same exact thing as Jack Will. Took my hand, forced a smile, looked down fast. "And Charlotte," said Mr. Tushman. Charlotte had the blondest hair I've ever seen. She didn't shake my hand, but gave me a quick little wave and smiled. "Hi, August. Nice to meet you," she said. "Hi," I said, looking down. She was wearing bright green Crocs. "So," said Mr. Tushman, putting his hands together in a kind of slow clap, "what I thought you guys could do is take August on a little tour of the school. Maybe you could start on the 3rd floor. That's where your homeroom class is going to be, room 301. I think Mrs. G is—" "Room 301!" Mrs. Garcia called out from the other room. "Room 301, Mr. Tushman nodded. "And then you can show August the science labs and the computer room, then work your way down to the library and the performance space on the 2nd floor. Take him to the cafeteria, of course." "Should we take him to the music room?" asked Julian. "Good idea, yes," said Mr. Tushman. "August, do you play any instruments?" "No," I said. It wasn't my favorite subject on account of the fact that I don't really have ears. Well, I do, but they don't exactly look like normal ears. "Well, you may enjoy seeing the music room anyway," said Mr. Tushman. "We have a very nice selection of percussion instruments." "August, you've been wanting to learn to play the drums," Mom said, trying to get me to look at her. But my eyes were covered by my bangs as I stared at a piece of old gum that was stuck to the bottom of Mr. Tushman's desk. "Great. Okay, so why don't you guys get going?" said Mr. Tushman. "Just be back here in—" he looked at Mom. "Half an hour, okay?" I think Mom nodded. "So is that okay with you, August?" he asked me. I didn't answer. "Is that okay, August?" Mom repeated. I looked at her now. I wanted her to see how mad I was at her. But then I saw her face and just nodded. She seemed more scared than I was. The other kids had started out the door, so I followed them. "See you soon," said Mom, her voice sounding a little higher than normal. I didn't answer her. All right, 5th grade, time to predict. What do you think is going to happen when Augie goes on a tour with Jack, Will, Charlotte, and Julian? And I know some of you have seen the movie or read the book, so you know, but just think, how is Augie feeling right now? How do you think Isabel is feeling? Nice job today.